Chefeteers, welcome. Thank you for joining us in our next segment for Trust Your Gut, Eat for Satisfaction. Today we are here with RD and anti-diet dietitian Anna Gustafson, and you also work in a product development role, so you've got that food science knowledge also, which I think is so helpful when we talk about this topic of gentle nutrition. So Anna, thank you so much for sharing your time with us and for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Nakia. It's really fun to be here, and I'm glad to be joining you all to share a little bit of my background and knowledge.
So I would love to start off with hearing how your work impacts the community that you serve.
So in my role as a product development dietitian, I kind of advise our team of food scientists how we can develop food that is, so I work with plant-based foods. So how can we design foods that are good for the planet and good for people? So they've been doing that for long before I joined the team, but I'm bringing this really science-backed approach. As a dietitian, part of the organizations I'm part of is that they release a lot of research that I have access to that my colleagues may not. So I'm able to access academic journals or research studies saying, here is the science behind the benefit of X plant-based protein, or here's why it's important that we may want to, limit our sodium in our product if we can. But also, I spend a lot of time kind of dismantling some of the diet culture talk that I hear around the office. So since I work for a plant-based food company, there is a lot of talk about this is good and bad. And since I'm new, I kind of sometimes bite my tongue because I'm like, I'm not here to like stomp on anyone's beliefs, and it's really hard to push back against that diet culture that's so ingrained in people. But I've kind of been trying to plant seeds where I can to bring my intuitive eating work. And as far as I work a little bit on the marketing side, and we work B2B, so we don't sell directly to consumers, but making sure that we're not using claims like guilt-free or like sinful or things like that imply morality. I really work to talk about the positive benefits of our food rather than the negative.
And it's always kind of walking a tightrope whenever you have people who are very ingrained in diet culture, planting the seed but not making anyone feel overwhelmed, I suppose.
Exactly. Because I heard an analogy recently that was, if you've been growing up your whole life in this diet culture believing, this food is good, this food is bad, and someone's like, no, food doesn't have morality, that can feel kind of like 2 + 2 = 5. And you're like, what do you mean food doesn't, it's not good or bad? What about XYZ? So it's really approaching it gently and planting those seeds to make gradual change.
So was there a single moment that led you to wanting to become a registered dietitian?
There was not a specific moment, but actually I can remember the moment I became interested in nutrition, and it gradually kind of snowballed. But when I was in high school, I was a dancer, and I was always just really interested in fitness, and was never particularly interested in nutrition until I was like a sophomore, and someone told me like that little pouch girls have like on their lower belly. She's like, girls can't get rid of that because it's to protect their uterus. And I remember asking my Phi Ed teacher, who in hindsight was like very ingrained in diet culture, and I asked her, is that true? Like, I heard that girls can't lose that. And mind you, at the time I was also just very thin, like prepubescent. And this teacher still gave me this response that she goes, oh no, you can totally lose that. It's all just nutrition. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, nutrition's important. But I've done a total 180 from that place where I came from. So I got interested in nutrition for like all of these health reasons that were, you want to tone your body, you want to lose weight, look a certain way, kind of interested in like all the superfoods and eating perfectly. And now I've kind of come to realize, oh wow, like there's so much more to nutrition, and there's so much more to life than nutrition too. So that's why I'm here to help people understand their relationship with food in their body and improve that so that they can focus on other more important things in their lives.
Awesome. And whenever you are speaking to someone who isn't familiar or brand new to this intuitive eating space, how do you go through those 10 principles of intuitive eating and explain gentle nutrition?
Yeah, that's a good question. It kind of depends on the situation. I've done some group seminars where I'll kind of just walk through the 10 principles and um, do it kind of chronologically. But if I'm working with a client, I figure out what is their most immediate need. And a lot of times you kind of have to jump to, I don't remember the exact number, but the principle that is challenge the food police. So that goes back to what I was saying before is like food has no moral value. And that is something I think that I've even trained like my family and friends kind of to do is if they'll say, oh, is this good? Is this food good? Is this food bad? You're the dietitian, you know. I'll say, well, technically, I don't like to describe foods as good and bad, but you know, this has XYZ nutrients. And sometimes they're like, oh my gosh, you're being so technical. Like, you don't need to be so nitty gritty about it. But I think that's really important because that just helps disseminate diet culture as a whole. But people have these beliefs in their heads, so I kind of like to start with what are your current food beliefs and do you have any food rules? Like, oh, I shouldn't eat white carbs or I shouldn't eat past a certain time of night. So I start with those kinds of like rules and saying, because you can't just tell someone intuitive eating is like eat whatever you want. And they're like, that's overwhelming. Um, and so gentle nutrition kind of comes into play last because you really have to focus because gentle nutrition is going back to like the conventional ideas of nutrition that we all know, which is, you know, eat your fruits and vegetables, get enough protein. And those things are super important, don't get me wrong. But if you're working with someone who's had a disordered eating past or has a troubled relationship with food, you don't want to start with that because they know all of that. You almost want to revert them to their childlike hunger and fullness cues, finding peace with their body and enjoyable movement, finding that mental health aspect of it um, before getting back to gentle nutrition. And basically, you don't want to focus on gentle nutrition first because that's what everyone already knows. And instead, you want to help them improve their relationship with food and their body before they revert back to, they can start introducing those gentle nutrition elements, which are, you know, eat more whole grains or eat your fruits and vegetables. But you really have to heal that relationship first.
Okay. So it's definitely not the first or second step. It's a few steps down the road.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so for us who have mostly thought of nutrition in the context of diet culture and what they provide to us, how do we decipher the science and fact-based messages from those harmful and fad-based messages?
I think one of the big things is if it's really marketed as like keto friendly, paleo, any kinds of claims on the front, like you know that that's a marketing ploy. Um, and I think learning, I mean, I don't want to say learning how to read nutrition labels because that is not my focus at all. Like, I want someone to go to the store and be comfortable picking something off the shelf and going, I'm comfortable eating this. I allow myself to eat any food without judgment. Um, but kind of looking beyond that front of the box. And instead of shopping for claims or shopping for labels, shopping for what sounds satisfying.
I like how you relate it to like being in the supermarket because that is what like everyone experiences, comparing the two products. A lot of times I think of diet culture messaging in like magazines and TV and all of that, but it is right on our food products too.
Absolutely.
And so we did already talk a little bit about good food and bad food and how absurd that labeling is, because I don't know about you, but I've never met an apple with like a morality code or it can be, you know, humorous and lighten the mood a bit, but these labels can create harmful ideas around how we choose our food. So are there some other adjectives that we can use that are more representative of the food?
Absolutely. So I think language and vocabulary is so important when you're talking about food because it's just those little nuanced things. Like I said, if someone goes, oh, I ate a waffle, that was so bad. I'm eating a waffle right now. Like, that doesn't make me a bad person. So instead, some of the language I like to use is for foods that we would normally call quote unquote good, or that some people might call good. So think like fruits and vegetables, whole grains, lean proteins, all the things that I learned in school for nutrition. as being those things you want to promote in your diet or eat more of. I think of those as nutrient-dense foods. Nutrient-dense is really my favorite word to use because it just tells you everything has nutrients. This one just has more of it in less space. I'm a little wary on the word healthy because healthy means something different to everyone, and I'll get back to that in a second. And as far as those other foods that some people might say are bad, like salty snacks or sweets, instead I like to use something that's less nutrient dense. So again, like chips, let's say, they still have carbohydrates, which are a really necessary component of our diet. And that's not to say that they're a bad food. That just means, maybe they're lacking some of the vitamins and minerals. So we say they're just less nutrient dense. I eat them because I enjoy them, not because I'm trying to get all of my nutrients from them. Another one is play foods. I kind of stay away from the word treat because treat kind of makes the assumption that you can only have it every once in a while. Whereas with intuitive eating, if you allow yourself to have that food whenever you want, it becomes less on a pedestal and it's more normalized. So if you had a box of cookies in your pantry, I love this kind of example is if you had a box of Oreos in your pantry, before I was an intuitive eater, I would have gone in there and eaten like a whole sleeve and then felt really bad just physically like, ooh, I'm really full and that was a lot of sugar and I'm jittery, and you kind of get this guilt and shame spiral. Versus as an intuitive eater, you're like, I've normalized Oreos. I can eat them whenever I want. I can have one, two, three, and like that might be plenty for me. I don't feel this need to binge on them because I don't have a scarcity mindset. Um, and back to the healthy and unhealthy piece of things, sometimes it's healthier to have an Oreo after dinner than it is to have a square of dark chocolate or something. Because people often use a square of dark chocolate as like your after dinner treat. I don't know about you, but like I have a sweet tooth. Square of dark chocolate is not going to cut it for me. So if I had a square of dark chocolate, I might be like, oh, like I'm still craving more sweets, and like I'm gonna have instead like a few more dark chocolates, then a few more, and I'm still gonna feel unsatisfied. Versus if I had an Oreo or two, whatever, I'd go, wow, that really hit the spot, and I don't feel guilty about it. So even though it was maybe the less nutrient dense option, um, it made me personally feel more satisfied and feel better about my food choice. So that would be the healthier option in that realm.
And so you say you don't really like using the word treat very much. What are some of your favorite alternatives?
Yeah, and actually what I like to do is when I think of the word treat, I think of sweets because you think of like an ice cream treat. So I'll use the word treat in that sense, like I want a sweet treat instead of like I'm going to treat myself to, for sake of using a better example, a bag of chips. A bag of chips to me isn't a treat because that's just a salty snack. That's just a food. To me, treat is like a sweet food. So cookies or brownies or something like that. Um, but if I were to be describing something that some people might call a treat, or oh, the word cheat, like CHEAT, when people say cheat meal, or I was really bad and I cheated, that is something that I really don't like using because you didn't cheat on anything. You didn't cheat on a test. You didn't cheat on your partner. You can't cheat on your food if you allow yourself to eat all food. Um, and it just implies, again, that guilt and that morality of cheating. So instead, because people will use the word treat in tandem with cheat, um, which is kind of why I avoid treats sometimes. But I'll say instead of I treated myself to some ice cream after dinner, I'll say I enjoyed a bowl of ice cream after dinner. Or instead of I treated myself to a bag of salty pretzels with my lunch, I'll say I had a crunchy pretzel snack with my lunch. I think adjectives and descriptors of, like you said, the actual food are really helpful because it takes away any kind of morality. You're just literally describing the food. And I actually have a graphic about this on my Instagram of words to describe food. And on either side of the I have three columns, and on the far sides, I have like the negative descriptors and the positive descriptors. And I say no over both of those. So it's like negative descriptors, sinful, naughty, toxic, junk. And then on the positive side, it's like guilt-free, superfood. Those are all really kind of stigmatizing words to describe food. So in the middle, I recommend words that I would use, which are decadent, satisfying, delicious, enjoyable. They almost sound kind of elementary because you're not assigning morality to them. It's like, I had a really delicious lunch versus I had a really bad lunch. I had a really guilt-free lunch.
And then you had mentioned that healthy means something different to everybody. And I'd love for you to touch a little bit more on that.
Yeah, so aside from, so I kind of discussed the food aspect of it, of sometimes choosing a bowl of ice cream after dinner or instead of a bowl of like, banana and ice cream or a cup of yogurt could be the healthier choice because it satisfies you and you can just eat a bowl of ice cream and move on with your life rather than eating, like I said, maybe it's yogurt with granola and going, I really wish I had ice cream, and now I'm fixating on food and wishing I had ice cream. Because studies show that the more you deprive yourself of something, the more fixated you become on it. And that certainly applies to food. So, aside from those kinds of examples, another one would be with exercise, because that's a part of intuitive eating as well as movement. So, some days it might be the healthy thing for you to do if you really enjoy high intensity workouts and it really gets you, say, going in the morning before work. If that gets your day going, gets your heart rate up, it makes you feel vibrant, then like by all means, do a HIIT workout when you wake up if it makes you feel good. And obviously that's good for your heart, it's good for your brain, it's good for your muscles. But it becomes a negative thing, it becomes unhealthy if you're working out for hours on end a day and you're missing social interaction or you're falling back on your work, and missing out on things you enjoy because you're spending so much time exercising. Or if you're exercising for aesthetic reasons, like, oh, I want to change my body, or just exercising out of obligation, like everyone else is exercising, so I need to exercise, then it becomes an unhealthy mindset. And that's where I say it'd be healthier for you to just skip a workout. I mean, that can be healthy for anyone at any time, but especially once you've kind of gone down that path of over exercise or exercise compulsion, it's certainly going to be healthier for you to rest and not work out.
So finding movement that really feels good to you, and again, just highlighting how personal all of this is. Like what feels good for one person, whether that's food or movement, is going to be different than anyone else. And so these big, broad, sweeping rules do not apply because the focus should really just be on each individual person.
Absolutely. And that's one thing with nutrition too, and just in general, because there's so much nutrition info out on the internet, people like to make those broad sweeping claims. People who are unqualified a lot of the time, I mean, I don't mean to say like everyone who's not a dietitian is unqualified. There are plenty of people who have gone through like an undergrad dietetics program and didn't go on to do the dietitian certification. And I would still, like, I have friends from college like that I would still trust. But anyway, all that to say, there are a lot of people out there who will make these broad sweeping claims like, you should never eat refined grains, or you should only eat lean proteins. So then if I were to be someone with like IBS and I go, well, whole grains actually really upset my intestinal tract. Like I can't really digest fiber very well. So I'm not supposed to eat refined grains. I guess I just won't eat any grains at all. And then you're eliminating a whole food group and missing out on all those nutrients. Yeah, and if it were to be lean proteins, someone would go, oh, you should never eat bacon or fatty beef. If that's really a part of your culture, if you came from a culture that ate a lot of meat and then all of a sudden you're cutting out these foods that your family enjoys together because someone on the internet told you shouldn't, then that becomes kind of an unhealthy obsession and you're really missing out on those cultural traditions and meaningful moments with your family. So it's really individualized, and that's why you can do as much research as you want on the internet, but if you really want individualized help, you should talk to a dietitian.
What is the best way for people to get in touch with you?
The best way to find me is on Instagram. I'm at Good Vibes Better Food. I am working on a website, so soon you'll be able to visit goodvibesbetterfood.com. So again, my name's Anna Gustafson. I'm a registered anti-diet dietitian. And if you ever want to get in touch with me directly, you can email me, anna@goodvibesbetterfood.com. If you want to talk to me one-on-one, I do take clients. I've got kind of a limited scope because I do have a full-time job as well, but I do currently have 3 spots available if you want to work with a dietitian on your relationship with food and exercise, intuitive eating.
Wonderful. And that's such a great way to that personal guidance that we all need with health.
Yeah, I would hope so, right? I mean, I think health is so individualized, and as much as we put our faith in our doctors, like they can only do so much because they've got all this knowledge, and you know, it's almost just too much for us. So I think it's important to see a specialist, especially when it comes to nutrition.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you, Chefeteers, for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon.